and over again until she knocked herself unconscious and had to be carried off by the head trauma fairy. Clemency had perfected her recipe for unbearably sweet, bubbly tea of sassafras root months before. Her father had dubbed the concoction root beer, and though Clemency thought it wrong to call something so sweet such a bitter, yeasty thing, the name once given seemed impossible to lose. Clemency understood the power of names, especially in the world of the make-believe. As with Rumpelstiltskin, a make-believe creature must obey any command given by a person who knows his name. It had been the Rumpelstiltskin rule that had earned Clemency the service of the hobgoblin Chafes Me So. And it had been by her discovery of the name Tinkasinge, the fairy of frequent and painful pointless antagonism, that Clemency had defeated the spiteful sprite and earned the magical ability to transform into a bee. Bumbling with the bees eased her boredom at first, but lost its appeal as she discovered that the only company to be had was bees. She quickly learned their language of dance, but found that bees rarely had anything interesting to say. "Can you believe all these blueberry blossoms?" she would dance. "The pollen does wonders for my vomit." Bees never danced the word honey, but called the stuff by its place in their lives, vomit. Her parents were not so charmed when Clemency asked for bee vomit to put on her popovers. "But the honeysuckle pollen," Clemency Bee would dance, "pure nastiness. Who'da thunk?" "Lot of work to do," any bee would respond, and buzz off without pause. Clemency hadn't turned into a bee for weeks now. Ever since the chill of winter had set in, Clemency Bee had discovered that it was easy to be chilled to the bone when you had an exoskeleton. She turned to books. Mr. Pogue's volumes were mostly instructional, concerning themselves with home remedies, woodworking, and cheesecraft. Mrs. Pogue's books were mostly about women who fell in love with either pirates or gypsies, but Clemency couldn't read them without blushing so thoroughly that her head threatened to pop. Her school had a few choice volumes in its library, and Clemency gave several thorough readings to The Tempest, The Goblin Jar Tree, Frankenstein, The Hatter Bear, and The Epic of Gilgamesh. But soon she had them all nearly memorized, and there were no more diversions to be had. On the long walk through the frosty afternoon forest, from the creaky wooden schoolhouse back to her kitten-warm cottage home, Clemency began to plot some trouble. She needed an excuse for adventure, some catastrophe that would justify calling Chafes Me So and attempting the impossible for a chance at the sublime. Maybe she could set fire to something, or start an earthquake. If she could get her hands on a wombat, 3 vegetable peelers, and enough contact cement. By the time she returned home, finished her homework, and began to cook dinner, Clemency had worked out a plot so nefarious, cold, and sweet that it made her teeth hurt. Her forest home, the balance of the world, and Clemency's good reputation may all have been lost had not her parents tumbled home from work and unleashed an avalanche of boxer dog pups. The 6 grinning, warm little bundles broke loose from Mrs. Pogue's arms and swept across the floor toward Clemency, where she stood, wide-eyed, with a wooden spoon over a pot of pumpkin soup. "Puppies!" She barely had a chance to shout before she was knocked off her feet and buried under gently scrabbling paws, baby dog bellies as soft as a sultan's pajamas, furiously wagging pencil-thin tails, and tongues that flopped rakishly from mouths that dogs smiled so wide they'd have shamed clams. Clemency laughed and rolled on the floor, trying to push the affectionate tongues from her face. "Do you think you could take care of some puppies for a few weeks?" Mrs. Pogue asked, plucking the spoon from the pile of puppies and stirring the pot of simmering pumpkin. "Yes!" Clemency shouted. "We can find somebody else if you're busy," her father said, rummaging through the junk drawer. "Yes, yes!" Clemency shouted around dog kisses. "You mean you want us to find somebody else?" her mom asked. "I'll watch the puppies! I'll watch the puppies!" Clemency shouted, pulling the most affectionate boxer from...
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.